All right, well, we've got 30, so we might kick off in the interest of time. So hi, everyone, and welcome to Masterclass number 4 on data sharing and use, AI and data governance in our 10-part Smart Places Masterclass series. My name is Sian Elliott, and I will be your facilitator today. First of all, I would like to acknowledge that I'm chairing this meeting on the land of the Burmadical peoples of the Eora Nation, who traditionally occupy the Parramatta area. I want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you all work today and join in virtually, and to welcome any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in the meeting. I want to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal people and the ongoing connection to the lands and waters of New South Wales. As I said, my name is Sian Elliott and I work at the Department of Planning, Industry and Environment, and I'm the Director of the Digital Products and Insights team here. I am very excited to be here today to share on this topic, something that is close to my heart and is what I do in my role at DPI, and I hope that we can have a really great conversation today. Data sharing and use, AI and data governance is something that I work with every day, but I'm also really happy to hear and learn from our 3 amazing speakers and everybody else who's participating in this conversation today. So a little bit of housekeeping before we get going. Can I please ask that everyone remain on mute during the call? And if you have any questions, can you please post them in the chat window? When we are opening for questions, I'll invite you to come off mute and ask directly. Throughout the 3 presentations today, the speakers may ask you to provide some direct feedback, so feel free to come off mute then as well. Last thing, today's session will be recorded and we'll let you know when you can access the recording at the conclusion of the session. There are 24 million reasons why getting your Smart Places data strategy right matters. But where to start? What resources are available and how can you plan in the steps to build your Smart Places sophistication and maturity? In order to answer this and much more, it is my great pleasure to introduce our 3 speakers today, Annette, Aurelie and Fang. Annette will be going first and give them away. Annette Slunsky is the Managing Director of Australia's only analytics association, the IAPA. During her 10 years with IAPA, Annette has advocated for the recognition of analytics in business, including the top 25 analytics leaders recognition program, skills recognition programs for data analytics, data scientists, and soon data engineers, plus corporate and individual memberships to IAPA. Welcome, Annette. Aurelie Jacquet is a member of the New South Wales Government AI Advisory Committee. She also works on leading global initiatives for the implementation of responsible AI as the chair of the Standards Committee representing Australia at the International Standards. In 2021, she won the Australia-New Zealand Women in AI and the Law Award and was recognised by Women in AI Ethics as one of the top 100. And finally, we have Distinguished Professor Feng Chen, who is a prominent leader in the AI data sciences space with an international reputation and industrial recognition. She's a winner of the Oscar Prize in Australian Science, the Australian Museum Eureka Prize for Excellence in Data Science, and has been appointed to the New South Wales Government AI Advisory Committee. She's also the Executive Director of Data Science in UTS. So welcome to all 3 of our speakers, and I'll first hand over to Annette to get us started.
Awesome, thank you so much. Now I'm just going to share my screen. So let me know when you can see the slides. We're all good. Awesome. Okay. So as Sian said, I'm the Managing Director of IAPA. We affectionately say IAPA is the home of the nerd, the data nerd. So that kind of makes me the chief nerd. So I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of this land, and pay my respects to the elders, both past, present and emerging. Thank you everyone for joining with us or joining this session. And I have a special call out to the most important person that's in the room. And to try and help you understand who the most important person in the room, here's some numbers. You may have guessed, but what I'm talking about is citizens of Australia, New South Wales and Wollondilly. It's a concept that at every meeting, at every discussion, you act like there's a citizen in the room and you design and decide based on the needs of the citizen. And this isn't a new concept. Citizen centricity is on par with customer centricity, and organisations globally have been working towards this since the 1980s. And it's the hub for all customer experience efforts. And we know that that pays off. We know that customer experience, or CX, it does matter. It adds revenue, it drives growth, and probably most importantly, it's expected. So citizens are customers, so what they experience outside of governmental interactions is the same kind of experience that they kind of expect from government too. And the essential thing about customer experience is it actually builds trust. And it turns out that a pandemic is actually good for trust. So you can see that this PwC report shows that trust has gone up over the course of the pandemic. So when we're talking about data, though, in any form, so collecting, using, analysing, storing, trust is essential, but you have to earn it and then you have to keep it. So while trust has gone up, sharing data may not be quite exactly where people are at right now. So how do we build trust? We start by building your data reputation at one element at a time, from your data, the data governance, data management, and then how you communicate and how you behave with consumers. It all builds to be your data reputation, and your data reputation then builds trust. So obviously this is a big area, and there's many facets that we could look at, but let's look at 5 for now. In terms of 5 elements to building your data reputation, the important decision points, and what's the citizen outcome we're looking for to engender that trust. So in terms of the first element, data quality, how are you getting consent? Have you got a simple opt-out? And we're trying to make sure that the citizens feel reassured that you're treating their data in the appropriate way. In terms of security, are you keeping it safe somewhere? Are you making sure that data breaches aren't going to happen? And where are you storing it? Is it in the cloud? Are you storing it at the edge? I mean, how are you doing that to build confidence? In terms of data use, what are the ethical governance structures that you've got in place? How are you avoiding bias? How can you show them that you're doing these things so that you can build their engagement? In terms of open access, to build transparency, how are you anonymising the data? How are you then sharing that anonymised data? And is it the way that you've done that able to be re-identified? We have the 5 safes model. So then we get to this part, which is monetisation. Now, to some, this is not on the table at all, but for others it is. Even if you don't actually look at monetisation as actual money, but you look at it as in terms of value sharing, data sharing principles are really important. Privacy principles are really important. We have laws about those things, but do citizens actually expect more than just what's in the law? And we'll talk, well, I'll show you something a little further on in terms of how movable this one actually is. So all the things that we're trying to engender from citizens are there. But so this is a bit esoteric, you know, it's a bit sort of, let's make it a bit more real, and let's make it real by using data as our guide. So if we look at how data flows through an organisation, and every organisation is sort of the same, I've simplified it. So for you very technical people, I'm sorry, but it's a simplified version. So we have to capture the data, we then have to store it somewhere, we then prepare it, manipulate it, analyse it, create an insight that someone can then make a decision about. That's pretty much how all the data flows through an organisation. And of course, it's all around the customer. So the customer is involved in all of these steps, maybe not physically in front of you, but you're dealing with customer data. And in terms of why we're doing these things, what are the key things we're trying to get out at each of these steps? We're moving from a customer experience that we're trying to build trust and build data quality. And this is going to be really important as we move through, and is an important precursor for any kind of AI implementation. We're trying to unify all the data storage elements and ensure that we have security. We're extracting value and insight out of the data that we have so that we can present unbiased, hopefully, insights so that someone can then make a decision. So that's the kind of issues that are involved at each step. If we then overlay some of the elements that we talked about before, you can see how different elements that we talked about are important across that data value chain. And we can argue where they start and they stop and all that kind of thing. But the important thing is understanding that at different points in the journey of data, different things are going to be more important, and you have to make sure that you're addressing the issues that are going to come up when you get to, say, security at data analysis stage. So it's going to be different to storage stage. So making sure that you have those policies in place so that you can do that. And in terms of data and what's going on, big data is here. And big data. So big data is here to stay, and it's only getting bigger. Does anyone know what this is? Please put it in the chat. Normally I'd ask people to shout it out. Does anyone know what this is? I'm going to wait until someone answers.
I think it must be CERN.
It is CERN. Well done. You get 10 points. That's the Large Hadron Collider at CERN. And every year their experiments create 400,000 petabytes or 400 exabytes from their experiments. There's no way they can store that amount of information. There's no way they can analyze that information. No way in hell. So using a algorithm to decide where the likely Higgs boson is going to be in the experimental data, they only capture 0.004% of all data that comes out of their experiments. So my point here is, as we get into big data and as we have a growing amount of Internet of Things and edge computing and lots of stuff happening, you don't have to capture everything, but you do have to capture the things that matter. And you have to then work out what are the things that matter, and then work out what is your data governance around that, and then how is your data management. So in terms of looking at the data, the other issue with this is you want to make sure that the data that you are capturing is good quality data. Every year IAPA does a skills and salary survey, and every year we ask about what are your biggest challenges to the people who use the data to extract meaning. And every year in the top 2, 3, 4 is access to high quality data. This is the thing they really want the most. So ensuring that you have that data, because these are the people that are going to be building your AI, and they're saying to you, we need timely access to high quality data. In terms of how that kind of works, in terms of this is the analytics maturity curve. You may have already seen it. It goes from at the left, descriptive analytics, which is very much around BI reporting, those kinds of things, what happened, looking backwards almost. Then we move into diagnostic, how did it happen, predictive and prescriptive. And when we're starting to get into predictive and prescriptive, we really are moving into this advanced analytics area. And this is where AI lives. So this whole advanced area is where AI lives. But if we then look at, okay, so if we're in this advanced analytics area, that's where AI is. How's Australia doing? Well, ACS did a report, the Digital Pulse report, and not doing quite as well as maybe we should. So there is a road to travel, and how are we going to get on this road? How do we start this journey? So if I go back to my value chain and we look at how an AI process would work, and again, I'm taking a simplified version of what an AI process looks like. There's the initial phase where you're trying to understand what you're trying to do, getting the data together, doing all of that kind of thing, prepping the data. We're then using our data scientists to develop the model, work out how it needs to work, validating it, all of that kind of thing. And then there's the third phase around deploying it, updating it, and doing all those kinds of things. So let's go. Let's get an AI. And we know that everyone wants one. So let's go. We should all just go out and get an AI. Maybe not. Maybe an AI is a bit like the shiny object syndrome, where we're chasing something and we're going, oh, we're going to get that. We're going to chase that. We're going to get an AI. Yes, we're following the AI and we're going to follow it. And look, we're going up here and we've got to such great heights. And then something happens and it doesn't quite work and things don't quite work the way they're meant to, and then all of a sudden you have to back out and things aren't. And the worst thing with this is people then distrust anything to do with AI. So before we jump in, we need to make sure that we have prepared ourselves so that we're not so much chasing the shiny object, but we're able to find a place where it makes sense for us to sit and be on the first row or the second row, or just getting our data ready, or however it works for you. But you don't have to be the top cat. You can actually start at the bottom and get your house in order in terms of data and how it works. It is something that is important. It's not necessarily the sexiest thing in the world, but if you don't do it, you are going to be like the little kitten at the top going, where do I go now? And we know that, again, here in the second one, data quality and skills of staff, understanding AI benefits and uses. This is from a Gartner report from 2019. These are the things that are challenging adoption of AI. So now I'm going to go back to my data value chain and say, we're going to focus now maybe on data collection to make sure we're going to get this. This is our first step in making sure that we're on our AI journey. And when you do that, there is one thing you need to be very careful of, and that's the creepy line. So the creepy line is where you know things about your particular audience that if you told them that you knew them in this detail, they wouldn't necessarily think that was good. It's not that you're not being transparent or anything, but they just... And right now you have years experience, experts in your organisation who can help you around making sure you don't overstep the creepy line. Can anyone guess who these experts, or which department you would go to get these experts to help you make sure you don't overstep the creepy line? Into the chat or call it out. Well done, Alistair. Marketing. Marketing people have been defending the creepy line for a long, long time, and they don't necessarily get it right. So they've learnt through mistakes about where the creepy line is. I think everyone knows the target example already. If you don't, add it to the questions and we can go into it in the question times at the end. But they know where that creepy line is, and they can help guide that outer ring of communication and behaviour to make sure that we are engendering trust. Because when we use data, everyone seems to think that it's something new, like it's the new black, it's the new oil, it's the new gold. This is the fun one, it's the new bacon. And this last one, I think they're just having a go at me. So everyone thinks data is new, but it's not. The thing that's happened is we've been analysing data for a long, long time. And this is an example, my best example. Can anyone guess what year, or around what year, this piece of beautiful analysis was done? Again, chat. Normally I'd ask people just to yell out if we were in a real life situation, but anyhow, we're having to use chat. Any idea? A bit before the 1930s. 1855 is pretty damn good, Nicholas. It is 1856. And for double points, Nicholas, do you know who did it? No? All right, I'm not going to wait. It's actually Florence Nightingale. So she did an analysis because, she was the nurse. So she wanted to give the decision makers the evidence to show that they needed to, I think it was wash their hands. It was in that era. So we've been doing this for a long time. The thing that happens is now the stakes have actually gone up. I'm going to show you just a quick video. It's only 2 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll just finish up and hand on to Fang.
During my first semester at MIT, I got computer vision software that was supposed to track my face. It didn't work until I put on this white mask. I'm thinking, all right, what's going on here? Is it the lighting conditions? Is it the angle at which I'm looking at the camera, or is there something more? That's when I started looking into issues of bias that can creep into technology.
Our ideas about technology that we think are normal are actually ideas that come from a very small and homogeneous group of people.
Vast amounts of data at incredible speeds.
Everybody has unconscious biases, and people embed their own biases into technology.
This kid got stopped as a result of facial recognition misidentification, and then used that as justification to search you. This is an innocent child.
Racism is becoming mechanized.
Systemic issues are only going to be hardwired into new technologies.
It's not just face classification, it's any data-centric technology.
Every day, we are all being scored.
Who gets hired, who gets housing.
I am making predictions for your life right now.
The people who own the code deploy it on other people, and there is no accountability.
Management at Atlantic Towers wanted to install the facial recognition software. Pretty much turn this place into Fort Knox.
The technology is being rapidly adopted, and there are no safeguards.
We are socially controlled in a way that we don't see.
Technology that analyzes faces could be biased, but the company is pushing it anyway.
What demographic is it most effective on?
White men.
Show me that it's going to be fair, that it's legal, before you put it out. That's what we don't have yet.
It's going to take people coming together, striving for justice in this age of automation.
So Coded Bias is actually on Netflix at the moment. It's about an hour-long documentary, and it is something that if you're looking at how you're going to use data in public places, it is a great grounder in that. And obviously the whole thing with this is, like Uncle Ben said, with great power comes great responsibility. So I just wanted to add in, there has been a ranking of smart cities that were done. I will put a link to the report in here. ACT does exceptionally well, Sydney does well, Melbourne does well, and then everyone else goes into negative. So it's an interesting comparative report that was done. It's out of sustainability. So in terms of what you should do next, other than listen very closely to Fang, is this is almost like a Kobayashi Maru moment. and you can change the game. You can change how you go about doing things, and you just need to be careful the road that you travel. And if you want to talk to people who are just like you, who are nerds, and you want to find a home, then IAPA is a great place to be, and there's lots of resources and community things, and we actually have someone from Spain speaking tomorrow about their COVID response and how they've used data and analytics. So that is your primer for the wonderful Fang Chen, and she is now going to continue.
Thanks a lot, Annette. What a great start. Let me share my slides. Let's keep saying us. I'm actually in the hotel just to finish my other. It's looking good.
Yep, we can see it. Thanks, Fang.
Okay, lovely. So talking about smart cities is such a fantastic topic. I was just in a water conference, Water in Adelaide, and apart from everyone talking about population growth or aging, infrastructure aging, we look at the resources. One side, we probably very rich on some resources like minerals. However, even looking at the water resources, are very sparse. Australia have 5% of global land mass, but we only have 1% of water. So regardless of how we're going to dealing with all the other challenges, we needed to wonder how we're going to use our precious resource smartly. When we're talking about the city, I just listed some stats here. We live in the city day in, day out, but do we really know our city? For example, of course, not everyone is going to look at the crime rate. So I did have a quick research onto that. Sydney LGA was 40 per 100,000 population to 2019, and actually dropped to around 31 per 100,000. Of course, we know what's happening last year. Looking at the rent in a unit in Sydney, it was 510 per week 2019, and it's changed quite a bit in last year. We all know the reason as well. So our roads, so many intersections, so many major roads, how many tuitions in Sydney, and then how many percent of them teaching dancing. So a lot of the things about our city, sorry, it's just keep asking me some software update. I probably need to keep up to date. So many facts and status changing in our city probably is a good question. How much we know city, how much we know city is running, how much we can do to improve the efficiency. I will very, very quick on recap this one. Everyone knows talking about smart city, quote some of the definitions, but by all means is using different type of digital methods, census, collect data in order to has a return to improve their operations across city. So fundamental themes, most of the talk we have by all kinds, talking about the reduced cost of living, improving the quality of life, enhancing environmental sustainability. I won't talk too much over this one, but I want to keep a certain layers there to clear. So when we're talking about smartness, what are the smartness means? So we have this utilizing the digital assets provide some kind of intelligence of adoption or usage of often leading to better decisions and behavior changes. And we have various different smart applications that sit on the layer, which is based on the data analytics. Of course, have to have data as the bottom of the line. And then we also need to consider various different technology base, including networks, including sensors. This is all, bring everything together, particularly. So I quote this report coming from McKinsey in terms of benefit. I'm going to keep it very short. You can find the report not hard from the website. Is looking at the potential improvement we can get out of AI. The top one, if you read the numbers, the top one is time and convenience. So in terms of time, say, for example, top right-hand side, time spent interacting with the healthcare and government, commute time, or those are the big ones, list the potentials. Safety is another one. So particularly around emergency responses and crime incidents, etc. We also can look at the left-hand side, environmental quality. That's a big one, and also social connections and civic participations. I think those ones is very, very important as well, because eventually, this, as Annette said, citizen-centric, and how we're going to use technology to improve or enhance the connectivity among citizens or between citizens and government and all the other organizations. When we're talking about smart cities, this is not a new concept, as has been floating for a while. We see a lot of new development. However, still the challenges remains. If we're talking about sustainability, talking about operational efficiency, talking about where to best allocate people, and according to resources and what is needed, what kind of infrastructure we need to plan, what sort of services need to be provided to support the quality of life. It's a complex or complicated system. All those components, they are, because the urban systems is one of the most complex socio-economical matrix, which consists of a large number of components, such as water, energy, transport, you name them. So if we categorize those challenges, this is not the total bucket list, but at least some of them. One is understand demand. Is how we're going to have a holistic view over various different demand of running cities or consumption in the cities. I named the energy, water, transport. We can list the housing, education, hospital, telecommunication, various different things. And almost every part of life is part of that, part of demand. And of course, the supply and resources are always limited, and how to seek a balancing act. The second category is about situational awareness. So understand current situation and condition of infrastructure, identify the potential hotspots problems, how you're going to understand water quality, and then exactly the quality of my water tap when you open it. And then also the infrastructures like roads, bridges, tunnels, and many, many different assets. And some of them is quite old, a couple hundred years old, some of them very new and different materials, lots of the stuff. Predictive analysis, that's a very big category, provide basically ahead of time some analysis so that you can take actions. Starting from design, urban design management, population, where the populations are, the movement, and I know we have census, but between 5 years, how you can get a bit ahead of curve, understanding in terms of the people movement, and so that you can act with housing, with schools, with different operations and services. Behavior is a very important and interesting category. because cities can't call cities without complex or complicated human beings. So we have different behavior, and behavior changes over the time based on different situation circumstances. For example, when weather changes, the energy, even shower patterns changes, and all those things. So it's not a bucket list, but you can see, because of the complexity and the interconnected all the challenges, that's make it is a smart city challenging, also interesting. Now, very quickly move to AI, as Annette put in a beautiful chart there, which is in 1800s, and we're talking about AI. It's not complete.
Sorry,
sounds like the hotel internet.
Yes.
She might have reached her limit.
But it's a really good slide.
While we wait for Zhang, I was going to ask if there's any questions that we can jump to.
Does everyone know about the target thing? I can fill space by talking about the target example of the creepy line.
Hello.
Oh, there we go. There's Zhang.
It's my hotel. Sorry, network. I'm so sorry. Let me share the slides again. Okie dokie. Is okay now? Just to put on the slideshow. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm back. Sorry. So the speeding ingredients for AI is a few. One is, of course, the algorithms keep improving, keep advancing, and the data is really one of the big changing factor. And of course, the other one is the computing power. And this is a real story. When I did my PhD, 20-something years ago, I was on speech recognition, and at that time, we have very limited database, and the database is coming from North America, and I have to fake my accent to North American so that I get a higher accuracy. This is the real story. And then, but in last 10-15, particularly, AI research development has advanced so much. I won't read all those details on the numbers. It's all the big numbers, and I only want to list. If you look at this chart, it's talking about global distribution of total papers on AI. If you're looking at the little dots, Australia, it's not on the top. However, if you can see, there's China and then North America, but Australia is pretty high up. I can provide more details around those ones if anyone is interested in explore. Before I look into the application, this is my second last slide on AI, which again, I borrowed another report, which is talking about the sector's leading AI adoption. But if you're looking at the leading sectors, financial, telco, transport, all those ones, more or less, smart cities those are part of smart city. Smart city has to include them anyways. So the demand is there, and I think we're on the journey. So when we're talking about smart city technologies and what really in the category of the things they can do, cost of living, safety, health, environment, connectivities, and jobs, time, efficiency, probably around the core of them. Let me give you a few examples around those ones. This is, again, is not a complete list, but we can hopefully trigger more discussions when we have some time later on. So looking at potentials for evidence-based decisions around governance, around management, around policy, around risk evaluation, investment assessment, how you plan smart infrastructures with all those sensors, potential robotics, potentially monitoring functions, all built in one, and this requires also we call cross-domain planning as well. We look at one of the symptom we always see is on the same street you has been digging out for many different purpose, from cables to gas, from water to electricity. So how could we have integrated the planning from the design perspective, also from maintenance perspective? Environment, lots of things talking about a better use of resources, understand the demand. For example, when in the water conference we were talking today, is not necessarily have to rediscover the new water sources. Probably, I mean, apart from diesel, we can't do much of that. Is how we can use some digital technology and data and trends to inform and then citizen behavior, to change the behavior of shower, to reduce some minutes, for example, under certain circumstances. All those ones make difference. Predictions of air pollution, waste management, emission, renewable energy, lots of them in the environmental category. Make city more efficient, smart. We're already seeing quite some applications: smart parking, smart bins, smart all those. So mobility. Again, is I'm going to emphasize about holistic approach later on. Is how we link all those. How could say it's the smartness in different verticals and the different regions, how we can utilize them all together or connect them better. Make cities safer. I saw quite some initiatives looking at the surveillance, particularly nighttime, coordinated incident disaster management. This is always on top of the list. And the last one is the connected communities. For example, when during COVID, we actually used quite some social media information to understand community sentiment, particular mental health implications, etc. Understand human behavior, understand people's choice, and how to provide better services, and some, automatic assistance stuff is also very, very interesting. I wanted to go through very quickly on these some growing smart cities. A few examples. Singapore, not a surprise. They're building dynamic 3D city models, which and then in collaboration underneath a data platform. I think is a very wise advancement on that, so that you can utilize that simulating crowd movement for spot venues, for example, home energy, water management, etc., and intelligent energy efficient lighting, public roads, all those ones very interesting. Next one, Dubai, digitizing the government services and monitoring for bus delivering using AI, and even interesting autonomous police stations where people can pay fines or report instances. Floating autonomous stations. You can see that's of course in the design model. Copenhagen is a city which has been nominated many times around the top list. monitoring traffic, have optimizing energy use according to fuel prices, and bike lanes, the cycling, connector parks, traffic lights, buildings, smart meter. Very, very interesting. Hong Kong, last one to mention, not least, is smart government, smart economy. Interesting, using lampposts fitted with sensors. And yeah, we have a lot of lampposts and electricity pole in all those ones. Yeah, if there's a lot of chance to fitting mobile friendly, dashboards to understand the city operations using various different sensors. So moving to the potentials. In terms of maximizing the potentials in smart city, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of spotted development, some of them quite advanced. And in order to make the potential maximized, I think an integrated platform for smart city is required. So this is listing some of the initiatives we have from UTS to build this integrated platform for smart city. So linking different large number of components such as water, transport, energy, healthcare, parking, retail, waste management all together. And then those ones they're not independent. They rather very closely collaborate with each other. For example, power outage in our energy system, that could have a big impact on other systems in the city, not only in the city, in any places. For example, mobile phone. So the power outage can cause the large, large amount of disaster fault in the mobile phone, the mobile network. COVID is another example. We just experienced as an extreme case. You see how many sectors, how many parts of the city has been shaken by that. So we're talking about the integrated platform. So data layer of connecting, providing the data connections is a very, very important, which not necessarily you have to have one place to host all the data, but you have to have a place, have an interface layer which you can query or gather or connect these different sectors of the urban system for data. Data management, I won't need to talk much. Nanette has already covered a lot on that. Holistic data analytics. This one, I think, is very important to break the vertical industry silos and have a holistic view. Visualization is also a very important layer, because this is will inform decisions and help to understand how all those where the data analytics the decision come from. And next to one, extensibility. There's when we have such kind of a platform or have analytics based on the platform, is always need to consider the new data comes and then new streams of events comes into that one. Cybersecurity is straightforward. So taking one example of incident impact and then society resilience, you can consider even COVID is one of the type of challenges we just face. Is how you can utilizing the property data, air quality, mobile transport, or those one to support certain decisions. For example, we're talking about the COVID time. One is the time lockdown, how to release the restrictions, what do people move. So all those ones is interconnected, and then the decision is not based on one thing, of course, and then it's not simply can draw down from one type of the data, which I understand a lot of initiative already in incorporating some data together, but we need to do that more. Without talking too much details, I wanted to put a summary around the consideration of implementing AI. We know that the data involve potential privacy, personal data, fairness, reliability, transparency, all those one. I'll leave to next speaker orally to talk all those one. I was only talk about we always needed to have oversight here, at least to a degree which we feel confident and can leave the work to complete AI. Otherwise, we keep human in loop. Building trust, understand technology, and address the ethics, security implications. Last one is inclusive design with vulnerable populations. So digital technology can't be, serving only certain group of populations. So yeah, thank you. I will stop here and leave to next speaker.
Great, thank you, Fang. And now we're just heading over to Aurelie to talk a little bit about taking the art of possible and having a few guardrails and standards to think of and the possible regulatory aspects. So over to you, Aurelie.
Thank you, Shah. First, good afternoon, everyone. And I just wanted to thank Annette and Fang for amazing presentation on the data sharing and on the possibility with AI. So today, what I will do, just checking everyone can see my slides.
Yep, we can see them.
Right. So today I'm just going to reinforce the fact that AI is a great technology that we need to seize, but we need to seize this responsibly. And I'm going to explain the roles that the standards have. I'm the chair of the standard committee that's representing Australia at the International Standard on AI. So I'm going to explain the work we do and how we can really help develop responsible framework for smart city. And what that means is, the way I see smart cities is extremely digitized environment where you've got a number of algorithms that interact with each other. And what we want to get to is effectively have a sentient world, like a smart city that's able to adapt and react to the needs of the citizen, and that works for each and every citizen. And that's what I'm going to explain and go through today. So in order to look at implementing AI responsibly, I think first we have to see what happens when it's used irresponsibly. You can see, you just need to look at the headlines in the news and you see there's a number of AI failures that just keep on popping up on the front page of the news. So there's already a strong trust deficit when you talk about AI. And this is at a time where we're not looking just at implementing a multiplicity of AI algorithms interacting together. It's just companies that's trialing out and having one algorithm operating in a specific environment. So you see from those headlines that the issues are building up more and more as there's some misuse, whether due to bad design or a lack of appropriate governance. The Alan Turing Institute summed up very well how many harms, it classifies the different harms that can be caused by AI, and they just classified it that way in 6 different categories. Bias and discrimination, the film that Annette referred to, Encoded Bias, is excellent. I highly recommend it, and it'll give you more insight in what's happening on the bias and discrimination piece. Denial of individual autonomy, recourse and rights. That's, you see, and I'll talk a bit more about it, how automation can can limit the rights of individual. Issue around transparency, explainability, that's also be on the front page of the newspaper quite often when talking about AI. So as much so as the invasion of privacy, disintegration of social connection, and unreliable, unsafe, and poor quality outcome. So these are the key harms that the Turing Institute has seen in the current development of AI algorithm. So when looking at smart cities, I was thinking, well, can we think currently of any highly digitized environment that's already using algorithm that we can use as a, let's say, maybe a predictor of what could happen with smart city if AI is used badly? So there's one actually example that's particularly relevant, and it's the financial market, especially the algorithmic trading has picked up massively in financial markets. And this is, let's say, a good ecosystem to have a look when you're looking at smart cities. The reason for it, it's because it's highly digitized and you have lots of algorithms that interacting with each other. And this explains exactly what can go wrong if you don't have a good governance, a good management of the ecosystem and of each of the algorithms. So 2010, you had a flash crash caused by algorithmic trading. In 20 minutes, the stock market had the biggest plunge in decades. So what happened? The Dow Jones index lost almost 9% of its value. So in smart cities, the real risk there is you can have a flash crash happen. And what would be the outcome is like you'll have an impact on reputation for, as I say, that's the issue with the constituency and the citizen, like having like a, the fallback, it impacted the business model of those algo traders. And obviously there were very heavy regulation that followed on. So how do we avoid such a scenario repeating again? Well, how do we use AI responsibly? So this was a catastrophic scenario that did happen. How do we avoid this? What's the example of other industries that also worked in a highly digitized environment with a number of algorithms that have done quite well, or that have embedded new technology and that have worked quite well? Well, the aviation industry has done particularly well. They started on a high ratio of facial incidents, and they managed to actually limit the amount of accident to a very, very minimal number. So aviation safety is one of the top in terms of managing the technology, etc. The aviation industry is one of the most trusted. How did they do that? Well, it's not just by looking at the technology, but it's also by looking at the human aspect and also the organizational aspect. These algorithms and AI, especially in the smart city, is a socio-technical system. So you need to look at all three aspects, and that's the way you get trustworthy system that people can rely on and trust. How do you, the question is really, how do you do this? Well, this is really not about reinventing the wheel here. What we effectively doing, if you look at the principles. So on the left-hand side, I've listed the New South Wales AI principle: community benefit, fairness, privacy and security, accountability, transparency. Those principles, you see, have been adopted around the world, and in a very good talks, the World Economic Forum just gave a different way to see those principles. It's possibly more about looking at them as issues that are found with the technology. whether it's there's issue when you look at AI, there's issue with transparency, with accountability, with privacy and security, with fairness, and to ensure community benefit. So these are the key issues we need to focus on in order to get trust. And again, this is not about reinventing the wheel. The transparency, accountability, privacy, and security, these are something we do today. It's really about mitigating your risk, looking at compliance, looking at roles and responsibility, and obviously ensuring that you can rely on the technology not to cause harm. So that's in all your risk management. However, what's new is really with the AI piece is, and that's fairness, that's having a algorithm that works for everyone, that provides you with a human experience that really interacts with well with the values of society. And the cherry on the cake is effectively to have algorithms that benefit society, so they become an intrinsic part of the society and are adopted widely. So that's where you add the value to society, and also from an algorithm perspective, that's where you make the difference. So how do you do good governance for AI? Well, the essential is really about looking at the data, the algorithm, and the organization, as I've said, but with a strong focus on prevention, keeping society in the loop. If you have many algorithms that operate across different, looking at water, looking at electricity or roads, safety, and they all interact together, you really need to have the society in the loop from a design perspective, but also as a mechanism to understand what goes wrong and provide the appropriate alerts to respond and have the appropriate mitigation and remediation response. So, how can standards help embed the essential of governance for a smart city? Standards can help you implement AI responsibly because they provide the best in-line practice. Currently, as I say, my committee is we're representing Australia at the standard, the international standard on AI. There's about 150 experts that work on these standards internationally. There's about we're working on 22 standards, and there's about 47 countries that are involved. So the aim is that as a result of the standards, there's a certification process that can be in place to make sure that technology is reliable, can be used by your organization, and therefore can be trusted. So one thing, so that's the aim of the standard, but also in doing that work, what we can do is really help bust some of the AI myths. That's the work we do in a very simple way to help guide to the true issue and to explain the myths and brings in the reality. So now I'm going to take you through a couple of the myths that are around AI and really explain what the reality is. So AI is easy to develop. Well, this is definitely a myth. The reality, AI is very complicated to do right. As mentioned, it requires good data. That's why, as Nanette explained in a presentation, data scientists are always asking first for quality data, because that's how you get well-designed models. You also need specialist skills and a long-time commitment to constant evaluation. Because it's a learning model, it's not good enough to test it once. It needs to be tested regularly. So as you see from this slide, AI requires careful preparation. So how can the standards help? Well, So we've been at the Standard Australia's working on data usage and data sharing. The New South Wales Chief Data Scientist has been leading this work at the GTC1 SC32. What we've been working is on developing terminology and use case to help with having a common framework to use the data and share it, and also to provide a safe and repeatable framework for data sharing. Some of the members here will be very familiar with this piece. As I said, Ian Opperman, who is in the room, has been leading this work, and that's the framework that is worked with ACS, and that's promoting internationally. So if you want to know more about this, you can always ping Ian. He's in the chat, and he can take some more question if you want to know a bit more about the data sharing framework. But this is a very important work because, as Annette said, this is the first piece of the puzzle. You need to have the data, to have quality data, before you can get to AI. The second myth is AI can solve any problem. This is definitely a myth. The reality is that AI is still narrow and targeted. And effectively, in order to have an appropriate AI, you need to make sure you've got quality data. So again, to get that quality data and to understand what your AI is able to do, my committee and at the ISO level, we've been working on those standards and answering those questions for you. First, how do I know that my data is good enough to be processed by an AI system? And I'll come back to it. I'll explain. It's not just about obtaining consent. It's about the characteristics, the context of the data, whether it's suitable, whether that data will really give you the right output that you need. And so the standard that we're working on this is the 5259. It's really explaining the data quality requirement. How do you know if the AI system itself is good enough? What are the key quality requirements? Again, these are the standards. I've listed the 3 standards that are looking at the quality requirement and the assessment from a machine learning perspective or from a neural network perspective. And finally, in order to do AI well, you need to have repeatable process to develop and use AI. So that's what standards been working on. We've explained through the life cycle, when you want to build an AI application, what are the repeatable steps that you need to put in place to have to be able to develop quality AI system. The next one of the myths is AI is dangerous. So for this one, I'm going to get a quick survey in the room. Does anyone know who this is? No? No idea who that person is? You can put it in the chat.
The side character, isn't it?
Indeed. So this is Norman. That was one of the key characters from Psycho. Why am I talking about Hitchcock now? It's because MIT did an interesting experiment back a couple of years ago, where it actually trained an algorithm on Hitchcock movie. And then it got then it actually asked the algorithm to it trained Norman to the normal algorithm, as they called him, to look at Rorschach stain and to actually explain what it sees. So as you see the result of the test, Norman said from this stain, they saw a man is murdered by a machine gun in broad daylight. While a normal algorithm that was not trained on Hitchcock movie was actually a person holding an umbrella in the air. So this means it's not AI that's dangerous. What is dangerous is really the way we use and design AI when we're not careful. So what we need to do is to look at risk management. Obviously, when we design AI, we need first to be mindful, back to the Norman case, like we need to be careful about the data we ingest. That's essential. And then we need to risk manage, because the AI system, as it's evolving, we need to make sure we have dynamic risk management, and that we keep monitoring and the AI system to ensure consistent output, but also we're able to adapt those control if there's a change in the output of the AI system. So how do you do that? Again, we've got standards here to help you. The data quality standard is always essential. So again, to have the understanding the characteristic of the data is will always be relevant to identify the risk. How to build a safe AI system, we're also leading the work here, and we have a specific piece on risk management and dynamic risk management that we're leading. There's also a governance piece that's very important at looking at what type of oversight an organization needs to have. Then there's the ethics, which is extremely important. We need to look at we need to move from the question of can we do it to should we do it. Going back to the idea of creepiness that Annette was mentioning, but also again the idea of trust. And as you see, facial recognition as due to the number of misuse that's been made of facial recognition, there's a lot of let's say negativity around the technology, and a number of jurisdictions are looking at banning the technology. Just on our doorstep, just the fact that that Darwin considered facial recognition raised straight away issues around surveillance and control. So there's a need to have really good understanding here of the threats that certain technology are, or rather an understanding of the perceived risk of certain technology due to the fact that certain actors misused it and they're creating angst in the population. So again, how do you address ethics? Data quality is it's always the same issue. It keeps coming back. So you're good in order to be able to do facial recognition ethically and properly. You need to understand the data, and you need to have the right quality of data. We're also looking at bias. How do you manage the bias that are embedded in the data? So there could be good bias that you may want to promote that are part of the society. There's emergency. Let's say in an emergency system, you will always look first to yourself for danger to yourself before you go and assist someone. So that's the bias that you want to build in. There's also unwanted bias that you need to detect, mitigate, manage and mitigate. We're also working on the explanation of AI system, and as I say, looking at the key ethical and societal concern and how organization can address them. So in a nutshell, the standards here are really an AI assurance framework for application of AI, and effectively that can be leveraged by smart city, because we look at the entire ecosystem, at the data, at the model, and the organizational governance. As I say, that's to take only a focus as approach to only one of those items has failed in the past. And that's why standards are doing very well and are recognized by many governments around the world as a next step to implement the AI principle. Is because it's looking at the entire socio-technological aspect of the system. The last point I'll make on this presentation is we're also working on you'll see on the middle part, on an AI management standard. This is a very important standard because it allows certification of AI system. So it's particularly important for smart city, because if you have certification of those AI system, it will enable to have algorithms that are certified and validated to interact with each other and manage those interaction better, and making sure they can be reliable and effectively trusted. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Aurelia. It's very interesting to hear about how we can implement AI responsibly. So now we're just going to spend about 10 minutes looking at a few of the case studies and particularly exploring what's been done already, some really good examples to follow, and also some examples of what not to do. So over to Fang and Aurelia for 1 or 2 case studies each.
If you want, I'm just gonna get started with one case study around data. So I'll share my screen again. So again, I think it's very important that we learn from previous incidents. On the left-hand side, this is what happened in 2016. I don't think I need to really go too much into the detail. I assume everyone is familiar with what happened with the MicroTay chatbot that was learning on Twitter data and just became suddenly sexist and racist very quickly, and had to be pulled. So that was one of the earlier issues that happens, and you'd think organization would learn from this piece, but the lessons not been learned yet, that really you have to be careful with the data that you use. We just saw it in 2020 in South Korea. What happened? I'll just give you a little bit more background on this this application. There's an AI company called Scatterlab that's launched what's called the Science of Love. They started to do that in 2016. And this app is to predict the degree of affection in relationship. And it's been one of the most popular apps using machine learning to determine whether someone likes you by analyzing the messenger conversation. So the CEO actually stated that the company's aim was to create an AI chatbot that people would prefer as a conversation partner rather than a normal person. I think there's a movie that's on the similar path. But what happened with this? So they used one in the South Korea. They trained the algorithm on chats, and there was about, let me see, the training data was about, yes, about 19% of the population was using the messenger conversation, and there was 10 billion conversation log that was used. This incident was worse than Tay chatbot. Not only did you have the same issues that happen, which is that the chatbot become sexist, racist? So same issue, but also it actually started to give personal details of the individuals, like all their personal data, revealed it in the chat to other people. So not only you had a problem with the values, but you had a major issue with privacy. Because, and the reason for that is because in the testing set, they actually use personal data. And that was actually used by the machine learning algorithm to spit back to individuals. So it just breached privacy on a number of attempts. Obviously, that algorithm's been pulled back, but the lesson, again, to learn here that I want to make very clear is do not create Norman algorithm in a smart city. We do not want to see any Norman, and that's why we need good data quality, good data governance, but also understanding the characteristic. So what is the data that we use? Is this, in what context was it collected? So if you think about your the data governance and the data quality that you need to make sure it's correct, accurate, and got consent, that's the beginning. For AI, you need to go one step further, understand the context of the data you collected, whether this data will actually give you the right output. So that's my word of caution on data quality for AI.
Great. Thank you, Aurelie. And Fang, have you got some real life case studies that you can share with us? Oh, you're on mute, sorry.
Sure, try to share my screen very quickly. Many real life examples. I want to be able to stop saying that, but I pick a few of them. So one is looking at, this is the water quality and then intelligent network work we have done with our partners, which in that case is Sydney Water. You're looking at, so we know in Australia overall, water quality is really good. However, the observation point of water quality is limited. If you're looking at the big scope of the the map, you look at, we have several hundreds of sampling points across the big areas. So the question asked is at the far end of the tap, when you open that, whether the quality is as standard as the reporting point of in the middle. So we actually used AI to do the prediction of the water quality using the past history sampling data and put this awareness map. You can look at the color. Of course, I mean, this is by all means is not particularly try to pinpoint a certain area. It is on the snapshot of that point. Some of them more reddish, some of them more greenish, and then we work with our partners to put some real-time measurement or sensors into those areas to really check whether the predictions versus the real life result is they matched or not matched. What you can do, what action you can take in terms of your various different chemicals you put into. And on top of that one is when we're talking about energy saving for water, around the world, about 5% of the energy actually using pumping water. So any saving in that regard is a good saving. It's a huge saving as well. So we need to understand the whole complex system, how it works, in order to determine the pumping protocols, which is when you start a pump, and a part of the asset you need to consider asset, their configurations and when to start. They almost have a dual pump, which one start first, which one is to safeguard, all those ones. The other one linked to is water quality, because you need to pump in the water at a certain speed and to a certain location, and a certain pressure, so that our shower tap is not dripping, is with a reasonable pressure. So all those ones interconnected, and then with the water quality awareness as pumped by AI, then we try to get a better understanding of a pumping protocol and the energy saving. Next one, very quickly, is the passenger flow analysis. I particularly picked this one because people will immediately jump on a lot of concerns in terms of catching people, etc. I think apart from follow all those protocols of ethics whatsoever, one thing we can make sure, which is you understand the outcomes. Outcomes for this one is counting people. It's not accounting is a woman or man, is not counting is black or white. Is counting how many numbers. So we don't need to under you see the dots, the flashing that that's the only thing we concern, or from the transport perspective concern. So all those banding box, you can see that that's a number on that one. We only recognize, save or recognize those numbers. That's all we need. So those ones need, when deploy those technologies, we can make that very straightforward to explain what sort of data collected and what sort of outcome you're actually using to. Then all the rest is passing by. And I leave some thoughts around here, which is a digital twin for city planning operations. So we have the other masterclass talking about the digital twin, and digital twin combined with the real-time analytics. This is actually one of the model our UTS is building, which is combine them together. It's going to be very, very powerful tool. So I will stop here and let's get into the other section of the masterclass.
All right, thanks so much. So now we're in the Q&A section. So I invite you all to post your questions in the meeting chat, and we'll kind of invite you to come and ask the questions. I think before we get going, I just want to thank all the speakers. Annette, firstly, love the cat video, and obviously the point around chasing shiny objects. Let's do an AI. Let's get an AI. Can I have one AI, please? All those sort of questions. Your point around getting your house in order and working towards adoptions of AI is vital, particularly around being citizen-centric and around trust, and using the data value chain to really understand how we can collect and use that data whilst also managing the creepy line. I think I'm going to use that now. I like that. And also, I haven't heard that data is the new bacon/tofu for that matter. So that was an interesting point. We then kind of went on to Fang, who summarized data in the smart city spaces and spoke about some of the key challenges around the various domains, using demand analysis, situation awareness, predictive analysis. So the question is how we can use AI and the wheel of all the possible smart city solutions that we can have. There are some great ideas around making cities safer, more efficient, having that positive impact on the environment, and really capturing what data science techniques can be used to capture the relationship between all our different sources across all of our various domains. And then finally, we went over to Orly, who brought home the importance of implementing AI responsibly, looking at what data governance looks like, and great to have some of those common myths busted around how easy it is to implement AI, and also how we don't want to see any Norman algorithms. So that was really important. So we have our first question. Over to Simon. Welcome to come off mute, Simon, and ask your question.
Thanks very much, Sean, and great panel, great presentations, and I loved how real the case studies made everything. I'm now sitting here having the privilege of being the Executive Director leading the Smart Places program, and I would like each of you as the panelists to tell me what you think we should commit to at the Smart Places Summit, and what's the action that we should take next to make the most of the opportunities offered by AI.
Have you done a citizen survey yet?
No, but we're developing a customer charter.
Right.
Good idea. Happy to put that in the mix.
Yeah. So Okay, so I'm not a smart cities expert, but just looking at how you might implement this, you might want to understand what the needs are from their perspective, and then work out, is there an opportunity to sort of co-develop what that might look like get them to have some skin in the game in terms of what's going to happen. And then once you have that information, then you can start the analysis of where you're going to go from there. And that means that by putting them at the center of what you're going to do and making sure that you have touch points to come back to them, then you're not going to have to worry about doing all this work. And then when you implement it, everyone goes, nah, don't want that. No. So get buy-in as you go along, and then you're more likely to then have a success. And that might slow you down a bit, but it's better than spending all that money and all that time and then getting to something where no one wants to use it. Hello, COVID app that didn't work.
Okay, can I jump in quickly on this? So I think we all talk about the data. It's never ending in terms of open data, etc. I'm not trumpeted on open data completely to everyone, but at least within government or within the people who participate in the smart places have an easier data sharing protocol, and can encourage people to using data cross domain, and then seek for some really good use cases around cross domain applications. So basically, it's not only from one angle to slice this the problem. Is from, as I mentioned earlier, is a cross domain. Say the disaster management, this kind of things maybe is a good example, but can be others, which you need to have people coming from transport, from water, energy, education, health, all those ones sort of working together. Creating some good examples of use cases of those ones will really help to accelerate the whole smart places, the adoption.
I'll pick up on this one too. So from my perspective, you want to maximize interoperability and how you can use data of citizen to make it work for them. So is really being able to articulate the frameworks that you need to follow in order to have a repeatable process that can be discussed and challenged and improved, because doesn't always get it right from the first go, by the community, also by the discussion with the regulator. So you want that framework to be fairly transparent, and one way to do this is to obviously look at the work we've been leading in the standards work and see how you can leverage the existing framework, how you can implement them as they're recognized internationally. So, as I say, to have more in engagement and to see how you can embed them to allow you to provide a responsible and repeatable framework to embed all those AI systems. There's also a couple of lessons that can easily be learned from the City of New York. They've done a heavy consultation on what happened for the use of AI system and had a lot of feedback. So that's also a good place to look at to see what are the issues they had to face and the response that they had to make.
Great, thank you so much. I'll now hand over to Dakshaini. Sorry, apologies if I get your name wrong. If you'd like to come on off mute and ask a question.
Thanks, Lou. Yeah, it's been a great conversation so far. I just had a question. We've heard a lot about the opportunities and the risks, but overall, I'm curious about how smart cities kind of impact on equity or inequality across, the full range of dimensions and vectors, so race, class, ability, gender, sexuality. and particularly how can these risks that have been highlighted be managed effectively if, particular people with lived experiences, such as being Black, Indigenous, people of colour, aren't necessarily in decision-making roles when it comes to data governance?
That's like the $1 million question. Fang, I think this one's for you.
Very good, very good. I think this is an important issue. Also, when we do data governance is one important part, which is looking at what data you're using and how you use and where you get them, etc. Also on the usage side, which is the analytics or AI side, that can be pinned down on various different lens. One is looking into decision making, how your decision has been made, whether you have contributing factor coming of your data attributes, like whether it's Black, Indigenous, whatever, links to your outcome of your decision. Doesn't matter is a prediction or is an analysis, etc. And then second one is you can actually do the evaluation on the weighting of different columns of the data you contributed to the actual result. So making that somewhat transparent or making that somewhat explainable, maybe that will be at least improving the understanding, improving the inclusiveness of all these AI and data journey.
So, and to add to this point, there's already laws to protect you around discrimination. So it's also reminding of those obligations. The Australian Human Rights Commission has done lots of work on the risk of bias, anti-discrimination, and possible technique to use. So bias is very much front mind. There's also, but it's also starting with the basics. So look at anti-discrimination as a first piece, make sure that you comply with this. Then it's also understanding the limitation of your algorithm. And maybe, as I say, you can improve the data, but you also can have algorithms that are designed for to promote the rights of the, and that are trained specifically on those minorities that can promote their journey. I'm a French person that came to Australia. I never followed quite the straight path. So I don't like the idea that there's one journey for everyone. It should be, so a smart city should really provide a tailored journey to adapt it to the need of each and individual person. You can do that with AI if you do it well. And that's by looking at the right data for everyone and not ignore and just targeting the majority. So designing for the edge cases and learning from these edge cases, that's where we see the best result in the technology. Obviously allowing for choice, for the right to correct, and the right to update and improve on the solution. I think these are the essential principles that we need to look at to develop the best technologies that suit each and every one of us.
And it even goes to the data that you're using. So if your training data is biased in the wrong way, or it doesn't include the people that you want to include, or you want to make sure that you're covering, then the algorithm's not going to include them because it's not trained on anything. So even going back to the very basics of making sure that you do a review of what kind of data you're using, how was it collected, is it representative anyway, are you covering off enough of the minorities or the people that you want to make sure that you're including in anything that you do. Even when you're just doing not advanced analytics, just normal analytics, that's kind of the basics of making sure that you're not biasing everything before you even start, because you can't take that bias out once you've collected the data.
And it may be that there's many different algorithms that are best for different people and they work together. So As you say, some algorithms are trained on certain data and promoting certain outcome. There's no reason we can't train it on different type of data to promote outcome for, as I say, for the other group of the population, and just get them to work together. So there's a few solutions that are considered at the moment on around bias. It's still an evolving field, obviously, but very much needed.
What a great question. Thank you. And I love the idea of designing for the edge case and training on all data, not just the easy data we have. I'd like to welcome Stuart. Oh, you can see you on video to come and ask your question.
Yes, so I think there's an understanding gap of AI within the general population, and I guess I was wanting to ask the population how they think business and government are going about, like how good a job are they doing in trying to fill that or attack that gap, and I guess then lead into what should they be doing.
The definition of AI, well, how long is a piece of string? How many different definitions that there are? There's no, while you can define it in words, when people go to then apply it, you know, one person's AI is another person's automated decision making. Now, is one right and one wrong? Who knows? But everyone wants to call it AI. So there's a little bit of maybe trying to take some shiny off what you're normally doing and adding to it just by calling it AI. So I think then people need to, it's the shiny object syndrome thing. Like start somewhere where it makes sense and then work your way to it. You don't have to have a shiny, you may not even need it. But if you start and you do the basics, you're going to get benefits from day one. If you improve your data sets, then your next descriptive analytics job, your report is going to be better. So I think, yeah, a lot of people get just enamored with this whole, we have to have an AI, it needs to be, get me one of them AIs. And really the journey has as much benefit as the end destination.
I'm going to jump in, stir the water a little bit. I think for sure we need more education on everything. However, from the population perspective, citizen perspective, I think we may want to focus on the outcomes. So the outcomes is, okay, what service is being provided, what decision has been made, and what's the portion of that has been involved data and AI, and then what are the process of involving them, why you decided those ones, rather than let them know what is AI. And it's just so many things people need to learn, right? So I'm just saying that is to affect the citizens, like to my, you know, mom and dad, to my, you know, uncle and auntie and the people on the neighborhood. A lot of the times the people are asking, what do you do? What do you do? And I found that to explain that a mathematical equation or those ones is not going to be successful. Is to say, okay, what this is a services affect our life and how those decisions are being made. And then I always take examples like a mobile phone. These guys, we use that now daily basis. How many people, I mean, now 90% Australians actually got a mobile phone, somewhat of this one. How many of us know how it works? The transmissions, you know, even the program running, even the battery, we know how to use it. We don't know, I mean, but this linked to my last point is from the leading organization, including government, including, you know, whatever top layer organizations need to hold hands of population citizens to build the trust of this AI and data has been deployed properly, and then citizens understand the path related to their life in terms of decision, how the decision will be made. And then that as long as we're filling that gap, at least we're sort of okay. And of course, when we promote STEM education, STEM, all those ones, we can bring more people along to understand the more technicality of AI and the data, how to, choose the model, choose the bias. All those ones can be fun, but it's a long journey.
And again, if you look at AI, it's definitely a buzzword at the moment.
No, she said she's never seen it, but she's only been here a few times since we moved up here. So I thought she might be.
Sorry, that is to go on mute.
So, to your point, AI is a bit of a buzzword right now, I think. And I think
sorry, can I just ask for everyone except for the speakers to go on mute, please?
Thank you, Shah. So time lucky. So AI will get ruse of everyone wants AI, everyone wants to do AI, definitely. However, what's happening and what we see more and more is once it's acquired, to actually implement it, there's already a psychological reaction within the company, and that it's dangerous, it's difficult, there's an issue with it. So while it's easy to get through the door for the implementation piece, you have that psychological aspect that's playing in that makes it hard to implement. And there's also specific applications that have appeared a lot in the news. So as soon as you mention facial recognition, as soon as you mention HR, using AI in HR or an employee, you have, let's say, that feeling of creepiness or that instant reaction, I don't think this is right. So what needs to be done to correct this? You come from already on the back foot on the trust because of so many applications that went wrong. It's to have a really good communication with individual and explaining the benefit, how this will turn into a positive for them and not in a surveillance mechanism, how it's like promoting their specific skills and be able to shine. I'm thinking about the HR piece. Rather than really trying to pick a standard model again and apply that standard model to everyone. So you have the AI problem, you have the data problems. There's been lots of issue about misuse, using people's data against them. So to be successful, it's really showcasing how you can use the data of individual to benefit them and to make their life easier and better, and how can AI help with that?
If we could get media to not like negative stories about AI, that would be awesome too. So more success stories about AI, bring them on, because that, at least then we're combating that need for journalists to talk about negative stories.
Brilliant. And Arlie, that's a really nice segue into the question from Brad around trust as well, if you want to come and ask it, Brad.
Thanks, everyone. And yeah, great chat. Not a direct correlation to my own experience, but I'm working in the context with an AI engine, business AI engine that does have structured data, but has failed to deliver, I guess, on the accuracy and the consistency of what it was promised to do. And just to put some context, it requires a significant number of stakeholders to actually put some effort in to train the engine and get it right, which hasn't happened. And so they've put the cart before the horse. They've gone out there and made a bit of a marketing song and dance about it, said it's going to do all these wonderful things. People have scratched the surface on the data and gone, that's not right, and that doesn't reflect my organisation. And so they're challenged now because there's like a second iteration of it, but there's that reputational and brand damage that's been done already. So thought I'd ask you the panels of experts who I'm sure have got some experience in this, as to what you would recommend. High level steps, obviously, but so thank you.
I'm happy to jump in first. So yeah, I've been, doing this deployment is my bread and butter. So like every day, I have some discussions around that. I use example to illustrate and then give you the steps. The first, or at least from my experience perspective. The example I want to give is around water again, because water, I've been working with the Sydney Water and other utilities more than a decade. That's a long time. And then starting point, when we look at water pipe in our cities, water pipe, the age between 200 to 10 years or 5, they varies. And our record on the digital record about failures only started about 20 years ago. So that means some pipe, like an old person, 200 years old, we only know 20 years of history. And we don't know whether this asset or this person has a heart attack, has any kidney failure in first 180 years. And now we try to use the last 20 years observation to understand what may happen. That means sometimes AI won't work perfectly because of the reason. So you're missing a lot of point in the past. So missing a lot of history, and then the exercise we did with the utilities is looking at first when the accuracy is not great, why, and then what are the reasons. Second one, what are the gaps that we can fill in. The third one is whether you can demonstrate with the gaps you identified, you can improve. Back on this water case is first time we predicted almost a decade ago, the prediction on the critical mains are not great because overall Sydney have maybe a couple of 6,000 or 7,000 of incident, but only about 100 is around the bigger pipes. It's very small instance. So in order to improve the accuracy, we work with all the partners, put the sensors in, for example, acoustic sensors around the potential risky places, and we test it every 2 weeks. Over last 3 years and exercise, now we proudly announce to say we can predict 80% of failures within 200 meters. This is actually, we just reported in the conference, give presentation. I think it's a journey. Journey is understand limitations, understand where's the gaps you can fill in, and then understand, you have process to improve it. Sorry, take long to answer the question.
And absolutely, you have to be here in the long run, right? As a first miss, AI is not a straight up solution. It is a solution that will take time, and where you have to especially spend a lot of time on the preparation, because you hear compliance by design, everything's becoming by design. The reason for that is it takes a long time to train a model, to have the right data, to actually have the right output. So you can't retrain your model very quickly all the time. So you need to have like a very, very good preparation where you get the right person in the team. And as I say, from a standard perspective, that's why we look like there's 2 pieces that are absolutely essential that we're looking at. As I say, one of the working groups just focused on data and data quality. And the second is on the assessment of the performance and the testing of AI system. So testing of AI is just still a new and developing area, but we're actually looking at all the different testing parameters and what are the quality requirements that you need, how you can measure them, and how you can measure the performance. So that's how, if you have a good preparation, look at the different testing techniques that exist and standardize your requirement. That's a good first step. And as Fang said, you also need to do constant monitoring. That's absolutely essential.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Oh, sorry.
You actually have almost like a crisis management communications problem before you even get to fixing what needs to happen. So transparency is going to be your friend in terms of what went wrong. So you're going to have to build their confidence in making the next decision by being able to communicate exactly why it didn't work the way they thought it might work and how you're going to do it differently before you even touch anything in technology. The first thing is it's a squishy human problem, not a hard tech problem to begin with. You need to build their confidence that you can do this, and that's, you know, communication, transparency. Sunlight is a great way to allow them to build their confidence that you can do what you're saying you can do.
Brilliant. That's some great advice. Thanks, panel. So that brings us to the conclusion of our Q&A. First of all, I'd like to thank our three incredible speakers, Annette, Fang and Orly. The presentations you had were great, and it's really helped us to get to the issues of what we were thinking about, and the conversation that ensued after was really insightful, and I personally have a number of takeaways as well. And thank you to our audience for some really great questions. I'd also like to extend our thanks to Mark Portlock from the Australian Computer Society for generously hosting us today, and who has been the technology wizard and pulled this session together behind the scenes. So thank you so much, Mark. The themes that we discussed today will be summarised and fed into the Smart Places Summit, which is happening in June. And I encourage you to all join the Masterclass series in the lead up to the summit. I think the next one's next Wednesday, and there's a link in the chat. Finally, the following links have been added to the chat. As you may have seen, we've got the presentation slides. There will be links to any of the other materials presented, like the videos, link to the ACS Masterclass YouTube channel, where we will upload a recording of today's session, and finally a link to register for the next Masterclass, which is next Wednesday. So I wanted to say thank you to everyone for your attendance today. It's a great turnout, and I hope you can join us for the next Masterclass in the series. Have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.